Hello everybody, this is Chaos with Chaos Esports Productions, bringing you another viewer cast. Today we're going to be taking another look at Strictan's PvZ. The main things he wanted us to focus on today was scouting, when to scout, and how to scout, when to take a third, especially when you're being pressured, and then also when to be aggressive in the matchup. So PvZ is a very interesting meta right now. A lot of people are going for this gateway expand style, which I think is quite nice. Gives the Protoss the ability to be a little bit more aggressive on the upfront, depending on what your opponent does. So we do see an immediate scout out. Now I'm going to have this on 2 times just because it's a fairly long game and I want to make sure that we get through the entire game. So Strictan's going to go out and see that everything's pretty normal. He did go for a hatch first, and that might be an indication of whether that we can maybe be a little bit aggressive. As we see, the first pylon's already going down out here, so cool. Cybernetics core's coming up. Now, I recommend getting the Warp Gate Research and the Mothership core as opposed to getting that first Stalker. Delay the Stalker just a little bit so you can get enough gas to get those 2 things in, because obviously Warp Gate Research needs to be researched as quickly as possible, so obviously if you want to be aggressive you can. So besides that, now I do want to make one quick comment here. You went ahead and built your pylon to go ahead and start walling off. Now in the PvZ matchup, the longer that your opponent stays on 2 bases over you, or an extra base over you, the longer he's going to be ahead. So you want to get this this natural down as quickly as possible to make sure that your economy stays toe-to-toe with your opponent. Because once you get into the later stages of the game, as we'll probably see here shortly, we'll see that the Zerg starts to get this huge bank as a function of having those extra bases for that much longer than you. So, going to be getting our forge up and then starting to wall off. Let's see, nothing else going behind this, just building probes and getting out another stalker. So, and then you're completing the wall off before you get your Nexus. In Bronze League, I don't think it's too terribly big of a deal that you're going with this style of play, just because you never know what you might find as far as laying all-ins and things like that. But I still think getting the Nexus down a little bit earlier is going to be very beneficial. I mean, we're at almost the 7-minute mark, and you're still not on your hatches, or Nexus hasn't even started. So, still haven't really made use of this pylon quite yet. So basically, we're going to be just chilling out, getting our. Now that Warp Gate Research is done, we're kind of looking in pretty good shape. Now, as far as scouting goes, I recommend getting this Sentry a lot earlier than you did. You actually built 2 Stalkers before the Sentry. And as a function of that, you don't really have that much energy to throw out a Hallucinated Phoenix and prepare for this attack. You're not going to be able to see what your opponent's doing. You're warping in now, but obviously it'd be a lot better to know that, hey, my opponent went straight roaches, or my opponent went all lings. Those type of things are good to know, as well as getting an idea of when he's choosing to take his lair. So had you gotten that Sentry a little bit earlier, you could have thrown down that Hallucinated Phoenix and at least gotten off that information. So at this point, you see him kind of moving out. You're going to be posturing in a little bit more of a defensive stance. One thing that I did notice throughout, you do get supply blocked a few times, which hinders your probe production, and obviously your natural doesn't get fully saturated. Plus, you also kept 2 guys and 2 gas for a very long time, so that's obviously gas that's being wasted or not being mined totally efficiently. So you're gonna just posture your army kind of here in the middle of the map. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is when your opponent starts to come in like this, some of your units, if they're not on hold position, will actually start to attack and follow the army. So your opponent can actually kite them back far enough that he can just take them out without having to fully engage your army. So need to be a little bit more careful about where you're posturing your army. Need to make sure that you have good eyes on what's going on in your mini-map. So also we have another Sentry over here that could easily throw down a Hallucinated Phoenix. As far as when to scout, there's no real, you know, here's when you need to scout at this time exactly. There are generalized scouting timings, like around 7:30 is when your opponent's probably going to be taking gas and potentially going up to lair. You just need to kind of go with the ebb and flow of the game, depending on what you're seeing out of your opponent. Depends on how much you need to scout and what you need to scout for. Obviously, if we look at your vision, we see that you only have the initial scout that you have. We haven't even seen the natural again. So throwing out a hallucinated phoenix to get an idea of what your opponent's doing would be a great idea. So now we're going to talk a little bit about when to take a third. Now, obviously at this point you're a little bit weary of when, just because your opponent has been more or less pressuring you. I wouldn't say completely pressuring you, but he's been, back and forth trying to take control of the middle of the map here. And now that you're back into your base, he feels pretty comfortable just go ahead and pushing at your natural. Now, one thing that you can do that I was thinking about earlier is, if you feel like you've been contained for too long, this map is actually a little bit forgiving, because you can easily destroy these rocks back here and go destroy these rocks and take your third in kind of a safer location. Obviously, he's got a fairly long area or path to travel in order to even consider being aggressive against this third, so he's more likely going to be just attacking your natural, just because it's a lot closer position for him to reinforce units. So he's going to come in here, you're going to put down some force fields to take out some of these roaches, so things are looking pretty good. This engagement didn't go too terribly well, just because you had minimal surface area on your zealots here at the front. And pretty much his roaches weren't doing anything that entire fight. So behind this, your opponent's just kind of doing whatever. Looks like he's still keeping up with larva injects. And basically, at this point, you're teching up to Colossus. So things are looking good. Now, your opponent actually does go Swarm Host here, which is probably, I'd say this map is pretty good with that, just because obviously you can have a handful of them over here, a handful of them over here, and kind of do this double-pronged Swarm Host attack on this main area. So one thing you want to keep in mind, especially when going up against Swarm Host, is you need area like AoE type moves like Storm or Colossus. Getting those out as quickly as possible is going to definitely help out your game as far as this matchup is concerned. So you come down here, you kind of get an idea of where your opponent is, and you're a little leery on moving out. Now, Swarm Hosts are out of the field, and you're going to be backing off just because you need to back off at this point. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is, with Swarm Hosts are very, very slow, especially off creep. So if you get in the opportunity to kind of totally avoid the Swarm Host, you can actually get around and start being aggressive, forcing him to either go for a base race or him having to retreat. And a lot of times, if he chooses to retreat, you're going to be in a little bit of an upper edge, just because he's not going to be able to get his Swarm Host down in time to actually be in the engagement. So you're just going to back off here, more or less. Wait for your Colossus to get out. No force fields thrown down so far. I'd say that was probably a decent enough choice. Now, engaging the little locusts themselves is, unless you have 2 or 3 Colossus, I highly recommend not engaging them, just because they're free units. Any unit that you lose as a function of locusts is more or less traded for free. So he's going to get in here, take out your forge, which is a little bit of a bummer, because that'll delay your upgrades. Upgrade-wise, you're doing pretty good. You're on 1-1, your opponent's on 1-1 as well, so you're pretty even. So yeah, basically at this point you're in a okay position. As far as supply, you're a little bit behind, but in general, the PvZ matchup, you tend to be a little bit more behind the entire game, just because larva are OP. But let's see, what else? So the other question, I believe, was when to be aggressive. Obviously, you have to understand what your opponent's doing and how many units they are truly losing. Like, in this engagement, you see that you're actually doing a fair amount of damage. You're taking out a good majority of the roaches, and I would say, surprisingly, that engagement went very well, even though you didn't have the surface area that was needed. And you did a pretty good job of getting up your gateway count early enough on that you can actually reinforce very, very quickly. Now, in the Bronze League especially, well, I'd say Bronze, Silver, and maybe a little bit of the Gold League, your main focus really should be on your macro as opposed to your micro. Making sure that your production and your warp-in cycles are consistent is going to be very, very crucial for you to rank up. You can see you're floating about 2,000 minerals. Had you been able to not be pylon blocked and consistently warping in, this deficiency would be a lot less. Obviously, you have some pretty nice force fields here and pretty much mitigate most of the damage that your opponent takes, and I believe this is where he goes ahead and taps out. So yeah, so basically what went well here is your opponent didn't do a very good job of keeping up with his larva injects and also keeping up with his unit production. As you can see, he's floating a significant amount of minerals and gas, so you turn those into all roaches, he's completely maxed out again. That's what that all boils down to. So, yeah, let me know what you think. I'd be interested to know if you have any other questions, especially about this game. This game was pretty straightforward, I think, especially for like a Bronze League game. I would say that there wasn't anything too complicated in here. So, just to recap, scouting patterns, try to keep up with what your opponent's doing. I mean, as we can see, you didn't get a scout on his entire base the entire game. You have no idea what your opponent's doing, so throwing out those hallucinated phoenix, or even getting observers, would be very, very helpful. Just get maybe 1 or 2 extra observers, maybe even throw down an extra robotics facility to get those observers out, just so you can keep tabs on what's going on. Taking a third, obviously this map's pretty nice because you can destroy these rocks and have easy access to a third base. In the case of a map where this isn't the case, you just have to kind of judge it based on where you think you're at. If you think you're super behind and are going to have a hard time defending that third, obviously you want to move out a little bit, maybe take a little bit more map control before you take that third, because obviously you want to know everything that's going on the field before you make a decision, an investment like that. So, and then as far as being aggressive, you have to understand how much damage you've done in an engagement. Obviously, when you pushed out, you had done a significant damage count to his roach numbers. So basically, he went from pretty much being maxed out to, like, I think it was 120 supply, which means obviously he's going to have time to re-max out, time to rebuild his units. So you can easily push out and be a little bit more on the aggressive side, simply because all of his units are coming from different locations, and there's a chance that you might be able to catch them in different waves. So basically, your army is fighting smaller chunks of units as opposed to one big full army. So I hope that helps. Feel free to go ahead and leave your comments down in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions down there. Also, if you enjoy the video, go ahead and feel free to hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to also like and share with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. And I think that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next game.